Hi, I'm Penny Peterson from the Mapping Prejudice team. I'm here to show you how to do transcriptions of our deeds. First thing you want to do is go to the mappingprejudice.org site, which you see on your screen right now, and go to the Get Involved. We need your help. So you go down here, you go to the zooniverse.org, you click on that, and you register if you haven't done so already. I've registered, so we'll skip this part. Once you've registered, you go back to the Mapping Prejudice site where it says go to our project page and start annotating. You click on that and a page like this will come up. As you go through this, there's descriptions and instructions on the right-hand side of the screen. Welcome to Mapping Prejudice. The image to your left is a Hennepin County property record that we believe contains racial restrictions. Now, not all of them will, and that's where we need your help. The computer is very smart, but it doesn't know the difference between Mary White and white as used in a racial restriction, for example. So as we go through this, you answer questions. The first question is, does this image contain or reference a racial covenant? Note that not all deeds will contain a covenant. Now this one happens to have some very fine print in it, and you can make these images bigger by pressing the plus button at the top, and then you can move this down. And as you read through this, why yes, there is a racial covenant. You can see it right here. Premises shall not be sold, mortgaged, or leased to or occupied by any person or persons other than members of the Caucasian race. So this one you'd answer as a yes. If it didn't have any, you would answer no. And there's also, I can't figure this one out. Try to save that if you really can't figure it out. So the next thing you do is hit the next bar. And the next question is, if the image spells out the racial covenant, mark explicit. If the image references a racial covenant in another document or references racial restrictions of record, mark reference. This one happens to be explicit. And then you hit next. The next question is, what is the covenant? And we also have something to help you along. If you need some help here, you're not quite sure, you can press the need some help with this task. And Kevin, one of my colleagues, has very helpfully supplied an example. An explicit racial covenant will spell out who can or cannot occupy the property. It will look something like this, and here he's highlighted it. So that's always helpful. But we know what this particular covenant says, so let's type it in at this point. So after you've typed it in, premises shall not be sold, mortgaged, or leased to or occupied by any person or persons other than members of the Caucasian race. You can correct this as you go along, as I made a typing error there. The next question is there a lot number? And again, you can use these little buttons at the top to move around. This one happens to have a number of lot numbers. So the answer is yes. So it's lot 14. So entering lot 14, comma, 15, comma, and 16. I think that's all. So you have 3 in this case. If you see a lot number that's a partial, say it says the north 1/2 of lot 1, you just enter partial. And go on to the next question. The next question is there a block number? In this case, yes, there is a block number. It's 5. Now, if you happen to have something where they have multiple blocks, say it was lot 1 and block 1 and lot 2 and block 2, you would enter these with commas. We just have 1 in this case. So the next question is, what is the addition name? And the addition name is Shenandoah Terrace. The addition name usually follows the lot or block numbers. It will be lots 1, 2, 3 in block 7, say, and the addition name. And the addition name is often something like Shenandoah Terrace or Nokomis on Edgewater or Edgewater on Nokomis. It can also be something called Auditor's Subdivision. It would be Auditor's Subdivision, say, number 500 or something like that. That can be a lot number too. And typically with Auditor's Subdivisions, there's no blocks. So we'll just type in Shenandoah, capitalize it. Now in this case, it's just Shenandoah Terrace, that's all it says. But if it said Shenandoah Terrace Edition 3, or 3rd edition, or 3rd division, you'd want to include that too, because this is the very crucial information that allows us to actually map these lots. So the next question is, who is the grantor? Now the grantor is the person or entity. It could be, in this case, it's the Shenandoah Terrace Company. It also could be a person's name, John and Mary Jones, say. So I will type in here, Shenandoah Terrace Company. Again, below this, there's a little, do you need some extra help? And there's an example that should help you figure out what the lot, or rather the addition number is. So always refer to that. They're very helpful little prompts. The next question is who is the grantee? That is, who is the person or entity that is buying this? And one way to tell the difference between these two is the Shenandoah Terrace Company is party of the first part. You see that right here? Whereas Chester J. Newmeyer and Charles O. Johnson are parties of the second part. That is, they are the buyers. So you type in these two names, Chester J. Newmeyer and Charles O. Johnson. Now, say you had 3 or 4 or many buyers, you could just list the first 2 and just leave it at that, or say John and Mary Doe, put a comma and et al, E-T-A-L. That means and the others. And you could do the same thing for the seller. Sometimes there are multiple sellers. You don't want to type out all 12 of them, for example. The last question is when was the deed executed? That is, what day did this take place on? And typically it'll read something like, this indenture made the, I believe this is the 16th day of December, 1925. So you just put that date. Now there's a little drop-down menu here, but you can also just type in 16 in this case, and then December is the 12th month, and then 1925. You can use whichever one appeals to you. And then you just hit done. And you've just completed one transcription. So we have another one here, and you can always tell you're on the right page. It'll have a black background. And again, that's in these instructions here. So as you go down, this one, this is one with that is an example of no racial restriction. It's a mortgage. There's nothing here that has any racial language in it. So in this case, we'll just answer no and go on to the next one. This explains things like unplatted land. If there's no lot and block, it's most likely unplatted land. Unplatted land can have racial covenants, but it's very hard. We can't map them easily. We will, but it's not as easy with lot and block. So unplatted land will also typically start out with something like all that part of the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 8, Township 118, north of Range 21, west of the 5th principal meridian. These are not lot and blocks. So if you see that, you're probably on unplatted land. I found a racial covenant, but it appears to be crossed out. Use the back button to navigate back to the first question and select, I can't figure this one out. And we'll look at that by hand. I noticed some deeds refer to cemetery plots with racial covenants. Why did you include these? Racially restricted cemeteries were another example of the underlying structural racism that determined what space people of color could or could not occupy. The Mapping Prejudice team felt that this practice should be documented. So those are on our fact sheet. Here we have an example of a false positive. Now again, we're looking at the image with the black background. It's on the page where they're most likely to find a racial covenant. So you see the black background, but just to let you go down here, there are other pages that you may need to refer to finish this. This one also has a black background, and I think I know why. And maybe the last one doesn't have a black background, so you can see you may have to refer to other pages to finish what you're doing. So let's go back to the first one. But this is a great example of a false positive. You see the black background, and here you do see what might be construed as racial language, but in this case, it's somebody's last name. Whereas Francis White, late of Baltimore, Maryland, that is someone's name. It doesn't refer to racial language. However, the computer doesn't know that. So we have Miles White in here, we have Francis A. White, Richard J. White. This appears to be racial language, but it is not. So in this case, we're going to say no. And go to the next one. You get examples of things that are false positives. This happens to be a power of attorney. That's where someone has granted another person the right to sign for him or her. Rarely do they refer to racial covenants. I'm not sure exactly why this one was flagged. It could be somebody's last name. It also could be just an idiosyncrasy of the optical character recognition. The computer thought it saw something. There is no racial covenant in this. It has a black background, but that doesn't mean there's always a racial covenant. So you have to read through it. In this case, it's just one person assigning another person a power of attorney. So in this case, we'll put no, and then go on to the next one. But say, for instance, you wanted to say something about this particular deed. You think you made a mistake, or there's just a question you have. You could also hit talk, and that would take you to our talk board. And in that case, you could look at this and make some comment like, I didn't understand something, or I made a mistake. I put down the grantor's name twice instead of grantee, grantor. And you can also go back from that. You can go to the talk board at any time you like. We have a number of things on the talk board. Announcements, anything that current is changed. We also have a frequently asked questions. Then there's also general discussion. And you should feel free to look at any of these. Maybe you'll learn something, maybe not. Maybe a question will be answered. And then there's image discussion. For instance, this individual, 14 hours ago, has a question on this particular deed. My aim is to get back to these people who ask questions within 24 hours. So if you do have a question, don't hesitate to write on the talk board and ask your question, and I will try to get back to you in a very timely manner.